Okay, thank you, everybody. Today is February 25th, 2020. This is the Kubernetes SIG Architecture Conformance Sub-Project meeting. Welcome, and please remember to be kind to each other according to our code of conduct. With that, Hippie, shall I hand it off to you?
Sure. Thanks for the introduction and the preface and for hosting and recording. I got some agenda items here. I don't know if we want to talk anything from Jeffrey and crew on the other components. We can put that till next meeting. But I wanted to make sure we made room.
So we did have we were there was a John Schnacke had a PR out there for a long time that wouldn't merge because of all these flakes, and Jeffrey just took it and rebased it with John's permission, and I approved it because it had already been approved. So I haven't checked. GitHub was having some issues earlier today. So I don't know if that's merged or yet not. I haven't looked, but probably not yet. But anyway, that and then Jeffrey, I think, has some additional things. Jeff, do you have any comments on that? We're making progress. It's coming along, but the next step is probably for me to sit down and do another pass at kind of trying to come up with enough behaviors to cover all the existing tests plus. And so that's going to take me another couple weeks. And then I also, along the lines of that, want to put together a cap finally for the profiles that, a couple years ago, literally, this was discussed, and I think there was some work on it, but what I'll do is take that and adapt it to what we have now for profiles and some ideas that a few of us here at least have talked about, and we can then review it in 2 weeks, I think, at this meeting.
Excellent. Glad to hear an update on the BDD KEP stuff. We were hoping to have the coverage for the last year as a dynamically loaded web thing, and as we tried to load all the data, we found some technical debt, and it's the first thing on the agenda, or after the behavior-driven plan, was the proxy and all the extra parameters that go after proxy. It's hazy in my mind that I didn't have a chance to go look it up, but we made a call on what to do with proxy, and most of the places in API Snooper we deal with it, we've muted it. However, as I'm revisiting it, because 115's data sets wouldn't load, I realized that we probably should include those, and it probably will change coverage and to a positive extent, but we won't get to see that for another few hours because the data sets, once we start loading them in there to do our materialized views, takes time, and we found that late yesterday.
I guess I don't recall this conversation. I don't know if I was involved at the time or not.
It might have been before you were here. I may reach out to Aaron and see. But we had the proxy parameters are handled differently with regards to operations, and that's where all focus was on operations at that point. And what happened was when we found something with a proxy, the logic was, don't worry about the proxy, count it as a hit towards the original endpoint. Whether that's accurate or not is the question. I looking at it now, I feel it's inaccurate. But so that affects, the next part was the IO website. I did go through and update, maybe I can share my screen today. I'll go through and create a tab and stick it on 3. Go. Just 1 second. I was trying to create a browser tab somewhere. Yeah, let's create it here. And so on API snoop.cncf.io today, that data is current as of this morning. But our hope is that the website that's up at API snoop.zz.i.coop, which is the one that's under construction, will show more the progress over time. And that will likely be later today because of the technical data around the proxy extra parms. The short version is I'm going to, unless there's a disagreement, I'm going to go ahead and enable that as far as coverage and see how that affects our numbers. To make it make sense, we should calculate coverage the same way anytime we change it all the way back to our beginning numbers, which is why having the raw data around is useful. So we're going back to 115 because that's stuff that's currently there. And if we want to go further than 115, well, like we spoke around last time, we'll need to cache a successful run of those jobs. That's for the API Snoop side of it. The next part has been something we've had some of our test writers come and go, but the flow has gotten pretty good. Where when I'm asking for help from other people or helping other people move stuff along, I've had really good feedback, and I've wanted a chance to kind of do that on the call, so we can see how the API Snoop and II team are flowing to create those things. So I'm going to share my going to try to share my desktop, and when I hit share, let me know if you see my screen. So this is going to be a demo of the workflow that we've adopted internally. So I'm going to pull off a browser tab as well and drop this into the chat. Possibly I may have to go over here. Not sure where the chat window goes. You have to click here in chat. So if I chat, this should go to everyone in the channel. And I will bring that over to my screen now. So I'm just doing this in a couple of terminals and a website. I could copy paste this from the web into a file, although the files are already there. To make it a little simpler and more clear, I have two files in a temp folder. And one of them is the test writing environment. And this goes through and pulls out API Snoop, and eventually might pulls out Kubernetes when you start writing tests, but it's just for this demo, we'll simplify it. This allows anybody who wants to get involved writing tests or working with API Snoop or really any Kubernetes project to start from just a simple env file and make it run. So as long as Docker works, it should be fine. The other part is our test writing shell, and that eats the env file and does a Docker run. You can see it does some things around running as privileged and host and a few other things that we can slowly get rid of and move to other things. But for now, this is a simple way for us to quickly get started. Usually we run this on a temporary box or a box, but it also runs fine on your laptops and whatnot. Any questions so far before I run anything? All right, I will go ahead and run our shell script. So apparently I need to run bash test writing shell. It will pop up a window. I'll make this full screen while we're working it. Is that easy for people to read?
Yeah, that's better.
All right, I want to make this, the whole point is to make this so other people can watch this later. So if I quit back out, and I'll just cat these real quick, the env file is super simple and fits on a page, and so is the shell script. You could probably copy paste that all from the web. And we're going to run just bash on our test writing shell script. and it's going to use something we're deciding to call kubemax. It's macros for Kubernetes and for working and collaborating together. It uses kind underneath, and it because we push and pull code, you want to set what your email and your name is. And there's time zones all over the place. Docker host is necessary if you're on a Windows or a Mac so that it can communicate to the Docker host there. Otherwise, it spins up. It can spin up a local registry, which helps speed up development of all the things. And then some stuff around the namespace and the folders to check out. So
just one thing to note also, debug mode is set to true, so it will print out a whole bunch more than it would normally, but I don't know if that's what you're going for or not.
Thanks for bringing that up. I also noted that home folder looks a bit weird. So I don't know if, is it the dir? You can see that it says kubemac init default repos folder. So I'm gonna go ahead and just set that real quick. We're just gonna put it in home II for now. And so, and you want to set the false? I guess we could. If something doesn't work, it might be easier for me to leave it on. So just in case, it doesn't have to be as verbose as it is, but you can see underneath it is mounting your kubeconfig folder, making sure that it can touch the kubeconfig file, and you could use a different config file. Creates the cluster based on something inside a cluster plus a registry, and that will take about a minute to come up. The flow that we're getting towards is to speed up having more people being able to write test or really anything within Kubernetes, because all of the workflow can either be within Docker and Kubernetes or just deployed directly to any cluster. We also need multiple nodes. Set it up so that when the cluster comes up, there's at least two nodes. Let's happen there. This was because we forgot to folder for kube. That took me completely out. Just 1 second, let me reconnect. So our temp folder from a moment ago. There's our files. Well, I think one thing that had a problem with was our kube config was not there. Just to go a quick restart on that. And our test routing env again. Put that to full screen one more time. It's in progress, but it has really helped us to capture and have us all use the same flow. It's been useful in onboarding people to write, test, and to create new issues. So part of what we'll do today is see the output of this as the files that we use to create the issues that we'll work through as far as promoting from through our board. Hopefully the demo stuff will work this time. Sorry about that. Snafu. We had some folks that were starting from Windows, and so we gave them a Windows zip file that had this in it, and they were able to get up and get to the point where they were having a cluster on their Windows box.
Seems it got past that issue. That's good.
Yeah, that's coming. So it's at this point, it's taken the Docker image for our work, the way we work into Kind. This would be the it just makes it faster. We could go and just run against an existing cluster kubectl apply, and it would bring it up as well. So now we're waiting for the in-cluster dev environment for API Snoop and test running to come up. This outer container is just running Docker init, and it's done all the work to make sure that kubectl works, and Kind was used to deploy it. So Kind get clusters. You'll see that it has the CNCF conformance cluster and our kubemax pod. And the last thing it says here is, do you want it to attach? So let's go ahead and run the attach. And at the moment that it does the attach, it'll flicker for a moment. But ideally what that does is allows me to go into our chat area.
May I note one thing? So just before I had a shell in that kubemax init container, but ideally you'd exit out of that and continue on your host to run kubectl. However, you may also continue in that environment, which I'm not sure if the shell continues if you're in debug mode or not, but that's one thing to take note of.
Thanks for that.
So it's seamless.
I'm going to I pasted this link into the chat, and you can either drop that into your terminal. iTerm2 works great on the OS X. Microsoft Terminal would work well soon if they merge in support for copy and pasting. And then on Linux, Xterm's about the one that works the best for now. So I'll give everybody a chance to come and take a look together. We're all pairing and sharing and doing this at the same time together. I suspect that first one is Caleb connecting. Yeah. And if anybody else wants to connect as well, it's 2 clients. So there we go, and someone else has joined. And we'll go ahead and continue. When you rejoin, don't do it from a phone just yet, because it will work, but it will make the screen really small. So back to our file. So we ran one command, and it got us into this test routing file, and it populated our clipboard so that we could work together with each other. This file actually includes the instructions for getting started. That file that these 2 files that tangle down to the test writing shell file, test writing env file. So we'll close those. We also have the how you reach the software that gets run. So you can use localhost or 127.0.0.xip.io, or iicoop has local. And any of those URLs in front of localhost.st, for example, will go to 127.0.0.1, and everything's set up to work on a local computer by default. But if you go down to here, we can choose to use a different IP. So this is dynamically going out and finding my IP and updating our flow so that we have different URLs to go to. This is if you're not with II or you want to use your own domain, that's fine too. I have a host that we're on right now that's provided by Packet. And so I just put everything blah, 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 hh.i.coop goes to this computer. If I look at what we've changed on this is our Git status. So we can see that I've customized the host for the ingress for our different services to use the host names that we provided here, including the XIP and the ICO-op instead of just localhost. So we'll go back to our test writing file. Now that that's up, we'll go ahead and bring up tilt. Tilt there's a tilt file now on the top of the API Snoop repo. And so if I go away from full screen for a moment, and in the browser, you can go back and see that the file we're working with is the tilt file. So I'll copy that and also paste it into our chat. Tilt's pretty interesting. We found about it here not too long ago. But if I, pardon me, go ahead and run this command one more time, and it says, have you pasted? And we'll say, yes, but I have to SSH out to the computer, hh.i.coop, and then we'll run that command. Pardon me. So it populated this command, and I'll connect and answer yes, I have pasted, and it will go ahead and run the tilt side. So if I were to take that second window and share it with everyone, where's my mouse? Here it is. Here's our chats. This is the second one. You'll notice the timestamp's different and the web's different. Go ahead and actually run tilt down real quick. There's one other thing that I wanted to do for this to work, and that was to, we can set passwords on all of this so that we're not just exposing it to the world. So we'll set a password of CNCF and API Snoop. And so once this comes back up, we'll take those steps. The output of this is for inside of the IAN API Snoop team is these tickets, and these tickets are based on the endpoints that we work on, and these files kind of drive through, helping us choose the test to work on. So if there's any part of this workflow that we want to modify or anything, everybody can feel free to do so. So I might just take a short break, and we'll go on to the next part where you see what the output of these sessions are. So I'm going to pull into screen 4. This is the document that we're working on together. This is the demo right here where I'm going through the demo, but I'm going to go ahead and go through our conformance board. This is how we measure or how we control the work. And did you just open this +7?
It looks like it was recent. Yep.
Yeah. So this is a +7 test. It's one of the larger ones that we've come up with. Here's the links to documentation for all of those endpoints. And I didn't realize we'd already created a triage ticket. So go ahead and grab that one. This is a ticket. Actually, both of these have already been created there. We'll just go through this top to show you we have PRs that we open for the workflow on these. I'll open these independently. The PRs themselves, that's actually the issue. This is the one. This is the API Snoop PR. So the API Snoop PRs include the markdown and the org file for that, so that we have in raw markdown coming from the org file the endpoints that we're going to focus on. links to the documentation, the mock test, and the outline and go. And this is a pretty big test, so it may take us a bit to review that. And here's the output of this mock test. It doesn't use anything specific to the testing framework. It's just kind of raw Golang as an example of what it will look like. And this is the ensuring that our live test hit it, and that these are they're hit by the new test for sure, and the increase in number. That's how we calculate that. This is, this raw file is taken and pasted into the new ticket. So this is our new ticket that's inside conformance. So these are the 3 to-triage tickets that have come from this workflow. And we'll go back here. Let's go ahead and one thing I was noting at our top level at our tilt file, if you want to work on any piece of software within here, you just need to uncomment the Docker build section of the tilt file, and that will use the folder specified at the end of line 8 there to override the image. So our Hasura image is how we do our database, and then there was an update that we needed today. So I'll go ahead and run tilt up again with that uncommented, and we can see in our build log for Hasura that actually got built. And in our, where would our chat area be? Is this it? And web browser. So if I were to go to tilt.hh.i.coop, this would be, and we changed this to be, it's II, sorry, II by default, and we'll just leave it as the default for now. We can actually see all the parts of the cluster coming up, including the PG admin, the Hasura, and the migrations occurring. So when the migrations are up, this is where API Snoop is bringing in the latest data from somewhere within the last 4 hours. And once that's done, we can look further at the workflow. So while we wait for that to come up, it takes like 3 minutes, but I want to value our time and keep moving things along. I'd like to go through the triage. So triage is where the II and API Snoop team have gone through and used our flow to identify things and write the test and then make sure that it's the work is well scoped. So I'm going to open those first. So to triage, to triage, to triage. So this first one is our +7, which may take some time, but the selection was basically look for stuff where the operation is based on replication controller. So this is primarily a replication controller lifecycle test. It's going to create a replication controller with a static label and go through this outline. We have another one for core v1 mock status that is 2, and it's based on looking stuff. It's focusing on operation ID like node status and not delete or create because we're focusing on the status portion. It lists the nodes, finds the latest created node and patches it and makes sure that it's not, the status is not ready. And then our last one is these 4 endpoints around core. This is just patching in. This is a funny one because we're always talking about endpoints, but this is actually the name of the endpoints. So these are our 3 that we want to go through and promote into our backlog. that's primarily what this meeting is for, is to try to move things across the board.
Yeah, I mean, replication controller is not really the recommended way, but it's part of V1 API. So,
let's comment on that. So we have that captured. It's
right. I mean, deployment essentially is intended to replace this. So the question
what's
is,
intended to replace it? I missed that.
I mean, deployment replaced replication controller quite a while ago, right? So question is whether, I mean, it's part of V1 API. Does that mean it should be part of, everybody has it?
We shipped 1.0 with the V1 API, and we haven't deprecated and we haven't removed it. I mean, it's part of the workload.
So we go ahead and make it part of conformance, I guess.
Yeah, and I know in the wild it's not as widely used, but a lot of people, there's still stuff out there that's using it. So I don't know that it's the top priority for sure.
Caleb, don't we use replication controller for kubemax so that or is that something else? Replica set.
I was hesitant about writing this up because of kind of what you two were saying. But yeah, I mean, it is CoV1 stable, so.
Yeah, it's there. It's not deprecated, and we should expect people to have it, I guess. Makes sense.
While we're all looking at the code, can we see if this makes sense as far as the outline?
Would you please be able to make it slightly bigger just for the video?
I can make it bigger. Yeah, thanks for requesting that directly. I'm going to try. I'm on a 4K screen. It's having trouble. I don't have a nice graphics card. I look at text all day.
Yeah, it's looking a bit better.
I may need to reshare. Ooh, it's getting big now. So the test outline is create a replication. Do you want to walk through this one since it's your PR?
Sure thing. If you wouldn't mind scrolling for me, that'd be great. Yeah, so we initially start the test by creating a replication controller with a static label. So when we list the replication controllers later in the test, that we can just use a label selector. I think that's the right term. As requested in a previous PR, the best way to list the items is by using a label selector so it doesn't go through everything on the cluster just in case it might be a lot. And then we add a new label. I'm actually just going to pull up this test on another window also. That is of okay. I think that's it. No, that isn't. My apologies, 1 second.
I want to bring over the performance meeting side by side. So
I mean, the one thing I would probably say at first blush is that we have to do more than just exercise the API. We have to check the data plane, so make sure that containers or that pods actually started. And we don't have to talk to the pods, but we need to check that they're there and they went into running state or whatever.
Yeah, that's good.
we get more to the API and the data plane. Make sure I capture this correctly.
Yeah, and when I say more than the API, I don't mean to say that we need to do something like beyond checking the API for those running pods. I don't want to, but we do need to check that the pods started.
Data.
Sorry, I was muted. More than the data aspect. In other words, we're not just checking CRUD.
Right, exactly. We're not just checking CRUD, we're checking that the actual functionality occurred.
And let's see if we can scroll back up and take a look and make sure we're not doing that. And like we've got the code here.
But like, so when you scale, you got to make sure that you actually end up with 2 pods, right?
Yeah.
example.
And so when we go to the replication controller status, the verification step needs to be checking for 2 pods, not just checking for that the replication controller status is happy. Nope, don't do that.
In terms of the scale, we watch for a change because we set up a watch earlier in the test towards once we create the replication control, and then we have some fixed variables. So if we decide, well, maybe we'll make this test start with 3 replicas in this replication controller, then we can change that in a more templated way. And then we have like a max replica count, so we can say we're going to scale to the max count, and if it equals the max count, which is 2 in this test ticket that I've got here, then we have succeeded in scaling. Is that kind of what you were suggesting, John?
Yeah, but you have to actually check that the pods get created, that the replicas actually get created, right? Not just the status of the replication controller, but the actual pods.
Okay.
Oh, that would be why. I put a motion forward that we put this in the backlog unless there's any objections. All right, I'm going to comment there. Any objections?
Looks good to me.
So that means coming over to our board, taking +7 and putting it in the sorted backlog. And I'll put it underneath the things that are already there. The next one is write core v1 status. This one is reading and patching the status. Do we have any thoughts on identifying this test as these endpoints as conformance or not before we go any further?
Node status, I don't see why we wouldn't.
And we have a read and a patch. And it's not something normally done from the API, like from,
Yeah, the
from
status
an
one.
end user, but it's still part of core. So.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's gonna write a.
And so now let's look at how we do that. List the nodes, find the latest created node, patch it to say it's not ready, and then get the node status to ensure ready is false. I'm not sure about that one. Should we create, well, it's a node, I guess that's the thing. This will be a destructive, that was your ask on the destructive test, wasn't it, Caleb?
Yeah, I was originally going to have this test perform those 2 API endpoint heads as well as the delete and create. But I'm thinking now maybe they should be separate. If you guys agree with that, or
Well, I mean, so okay, so if we're talking about nodes, right? We're definitely into this is like stuff Qubit would be doing, and it's definitely going to be privileged, and it's definitely going to be, which is okay, but it's going to be, if we do it on an existing node, that's going to be potentially disruptive. I don't know, Clayton, if you know, like, if we start messing with the node status, and I guess Qubit's going to just overwrite what we just did, and there's going to be some kind of race condition at that point.
Yeah, we those are like, we would probably say that's a serial test, and we have to be careful about how many serial conformance tests we had. To some degree, though, that's I think that it is important enough to say that a cluster should respond to some of these things that I could buy. We're going to have to start moving into serial disruptive tests, and we aren't going to be able to require someone to create a special machine that's isolated for other reasons.
Totally.
And so it comes down to, do we want to have the test and ensure people are conformant? Because this is a key part of cluster behavior that expresses the platform. So I would probably say it's worth it here to do a serial test.
Or I mean, do we create our own fake node, essentially?
I would, we could, we have to
Feels
think
like
about
we're testing the API for the CRUD bits versus actually getting it to.
Yeah, there's all sorts of problems with creating our own node because, for instance, and like this is a general problem today. So like Cube today only support, for most of the cloud providers, only supports a single region. We do not support having the cloud provider on for something like AWS and then having node objects that exist that don't match instances. The node, the cloud controller will come along and try to delete it. So it's probably not worth going down that route for now, although arguably that is a scenario that should be supported by Cube as people want to run more diverse octopus clusters. We're just not there yet.
Yeah.
So as long as
how are we going to make a deterministic test, right? Like when you say serial, but like if we were to go and patch a node status with not ready, what is kubelet gonna do? We're doing this.
Gonna override it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is gonna be, so I wouldn't say destructive, we would say disruptive. However, I will note that serial basically implies disruptive today. We don't necessarily require you to put both serial and disruptive, but yeah, this is a hard thing to test. Unfortunately, unless you can create a pod that'll run on the node that guarantees that the node will shut down across every operating system that can run on Cube, I think you're going to run into a lot of problems with this. So this test just may not be possible with the current set of constraints we have on a conformance test.
What's the likelihood of getting that restricted and, what's the word? In the environment which doesn't mess with anything else, that we're able to run these kind of destructive calls against?
You're not going to be able to do it across all platforms, because what would happen would be, like, if you're running on a system D system, you can use shutdown. You could use shutdown-R, but that won't work on Windows. It's possible that what we're missing here with conformance is a way for someone to, we're going to get into this territory with disruptive testing, no matter what. I think it might be, this just may be too hard to do in the core platform today.
Okay. So that
In a conformance test,
perhaps call for a more architectural thing to discuss for other. Okay.
Yeah, this probably then gets pushed down to lower priority because we've got lower hanging fruit.
Yeah, in general, one of the things that is a challenge today, and I don't think this is conformance's job initially, is we are undercovered on the sort of core consistency testing that would catch issues like this because of the diversity of platforms. That's causing problems for lots of people, like problems with pod safety guarantees can be violated if someone added a controller to the platform that did something weird. We don't have anything to test for that. We should, because that's something that could fundamentally break a user workload running on that cluster. But it is going to be lower down that priority list because it's a bigger effort.
Sure. That's good.
I have tried to capture this best. I'm going to open up my little note window to make sure that as far as I'm trying to capture this on behalf of the group. We need not to tag serial. We would need, now that we're saying we're not going to, we would need to tag serial and have the nodes that can be targeted for disruptive. Serial implies disruptive. It would be deterministic because kubelet would would overwrite the status, which now gets us into our constraints, where we needed to work across all platforms for Windows system, Windows and others. And we don't have a framework right now for disruptive cross-cloud test. Maybe this isn't a conformance thing yet, because we've got lots of other low-hanging fruit. And so the vote is for push down. What's it called? Deprioritize for now. Any dissension?
That sounds about right.
All right. Thank you for that work, Caleb. Having things that are well understood that we're not doing now is valuable.
Totally. It's good. Glad to have these things discussed.
So this was +4. Do you want to walk through this one? Or do you want me to do it?
You've got it up.
Okay. Yeah, so this was focusing on, we just look at our little operation. This is the endpoints one. So replaced endpoints and list endpoints and delete collection namespace endpoints. That's a new delete collection action. I've not seen that one before.
It's by the label selector. I'll let you list it and then delete all that matched up.
Fair. Before we go, are these an okay selection of general operations that are targeting for conformance?
Well, okay, so we get into a little bit of a situation. So what are the, so endpoints are typically, unless they're without a selector. When you create a service with a selector, then the endpoints controller is going to manage the endpoints associated with that service. And so if we start messing with things out of band, right, you're going to end up in the same kind of thing where you have a race condition between what we're changing and what the endpoints controller is changing. So we could test these. One is what kind of, we have some service conformance tests now that are going to implicitly test the endpoints code for services that generate endpoints. I guess we could do these tests as explicit tests around endpoints that are manual endpoints, that is not handled by the endpoints controller. So I think that would be okay. That seems like those would be the pieces you would need.
Make sure I'm capturing this. So how we would need to create new endpoints dynamically to
No, I'm just
test this API. So go ahead.
I'm sorry. Let me say that all again. So I'm trying to understand where these fit into the scope of what's done on the endpoints. And typically those, under most circumstances, are managed by the endpoints controller. But there's a case where if you, that's only for service, only for endpoints that are part of a service with a selector. So it's possible to create a service without a selector. That is, internally, selector is one of the fields of service, in which case the endpoints controller simply ignores it, and you have to manually create the endpoints. That's what we would have to do in this case. That's what I'm trying to say. The other case of how the endpoints controller tests, our conformance tests work, would already be covered by our service tests. We have a bunch of tests already, I believe, in conformance that check when you create a service, you get actual data plane. I don't know that we check the endpoints, but we check the data plane. So in short, I think this is probably fine for doing these sort of tests with services associated without a selector, or endpoints, manually created endpoints like that. But you would,
let's try this with end. So I just say normally.
The point is, endpoints go along with services. You're not typically going to create just endpoints on their own. And So you would want to probably create a service to go along with this, and then use the same data plane pieces for the service, I guess, that we do checks that we do for other services. Those are done for services that use the endpoints controller. These would be for services that are manually created. I don't think we can right now, but we'd have to go look.
All right, let me reread our summary.
Go
Go
if
ahead.
I just may, if I understand what you're saying correctly, John, so services, the endpoints are managed when the services are created, and in this test, service is created, and then we now have an endpoint for it, and the service which is created does actually have a label selector. However, it points to something that likely doesn't exist, although it probably would
No,
be a good idea.
you want to create a service without a label select, without
Okay,
a selector, like,
sure.
right? And that basically tells the endpoints controller, this is out of your scope. Don't do anything with the service, essentially.
Yeah.
And then we manually create those endpoints,
Okay.
and we validate that the service functionality still works, which it should.
Okay.
But it actually means that like those will still get plumbed through proxy, even though they're manually created endpoints, because the proxy doesn't care what service controller created.
It sounds like, as I was just summary to the bottom, we're going to create service and selector. That'll keep it on the endpoint controller.
I'm sorry, we can barely hear you, VP.
I got to remember to hit unmute. Endpoints normally go along with services. We want to create a service and selector to keep it out of the endpoints controller so we can test directly.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, yeah, I think I understand now. That sounds good.
All right, I'm going to say that we agreed for backlog.
And you might just want to put a comment on there to double check that we don't already have a test for manually created endpoints.
We have the technology to do that.
I believe that there is, because it didn't show up in the query above.
Right,
Sure.
but they may not be hitting those specific endpoints, right? Even if they're like, just may not be have all the same cover all the things you want. But
I think that's what we're trying to figure out. If they're not, there may be endpoints that are doing a similar thing but not hitting the endpoints. And I think it's unclear how to identify what those tests are if they're not hitting the endpoints that we're specifically targeting.
right, well, they should be. You're right. We're definitely hitting creation of endpoints, for example. But it's probably the question is whether it's all being done by the endpoints controller implicitly when we do our service test.
You're right.
There's an explicit test for manually created endpoints. I don't remember seeing one for manually created endpoints.
Caleb, what I suggest is also look at all the what do they call the user agents that hit the endpoint, and we should be able to tie back if it's getting hit by the endpoint controller. We should be able to bring the logs together to figure out which test is hitting it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Whether it's, and let me try to spell slightly better. It's not working today. All right, I agreed for backlog. So let's say okay there because we're running out of time. So I'm gonna take this new one. This is node status. That was endpoints actually. So endpoints now goes underneath here. We did a promotion. Yay. And let's stop there. There are plenty of work in the backlog and we've sorted things correctly. There's a few things on promotions. Most of our work in the last 2 to 4 weeks has been on increasing the velocity of us creating the mock test versus getting the promotions through. But I'm looking forward to that speeding up quite well. And for the last little part of our demo, it's up. and then we can go to API snoop dot hh.i.coop/coverage, and this is what's loaded and how we write our test. And inside of we won't continue any further, but that's how we do it. Any thoughts or questions before I give you back 30 seconds? I'll keep the demos out of this time. I didn't realize that it would that we'd run out today.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.